Who doesn't love a passive ability? It's on all the time. It affects either everything you do or the main thing you do. It just enhances what you're already doing. It's got to be great. It's pure bonus. I'm not talking about passive effects that allow you to break the rules in a certain way, like, say you don't provoke opportunity attacks. That's going to change the way you play. I'm talking about passive bonuses, which are not necessarily numerical bonuses, but enhancements of some sort. Enhancements to the things you're already doing. Like strict upgrades. Or passive, always-on defensive buffs, such as the rogue's evasion ability, where you take no damage instead of half damage when you succeed on a dex save, versus an effect that would normally deal half damage on a successful save. So that qualifies in what I'm talking about. Passive abilities sound really cool. I know from personal experience that when I see a passive ability, I'm like, probably going to take that. If I'm leveling up a character, or I'm advancing, or I'm building a character in some way, and I see the opportunity to take a passive effect, I'm probably going to take that passive effect. Or at least that's my first impulse. Sometimes there are reasons not to. Passive abilities are an interesting, and not just like, they don't even have to be, some things like may qualify for this that it probably wouldn't register as a passive ability. But like, for example, the rogue, that you're going to be getting a lot of the rogue in this video because it's emblematic of the problem that I'm talking about. When the rogue hits an odd numbered level, their sneak attack improves by 1d6. That counts as a passive ability because it is always on, and you don't have to like spend anything to do it. It's not an additional action. It's not a choice you're making. There's no choice involved in doing more sneak attack damage. Just whenever you do sneak attack, you're going to do more sneak attack. The problem is that an abundance of passive abilities does not change gameplay. It doesn't enhance gameplay in any way. It does make your character more powerful to varying degrees, depending on the specific ability. So it is an upgrade, but it doesn't change the way you play. It doesn't give you new experiences. It doesn't enhance your character's playstyle. Now, does every single part of a character's kit need to enhance your playstyle? No, clearly not. But I would argue that some should. The rogue will occasionally, I want to say there's 4 active abilities that the rogue gets. Throughout 20 levels, they get 4 active abilities. Not counting those that they might get from feats, because those are not really part of the class, per se. It's not part of the class design. Yeah, let me just cough it out. The issue that you run into with the rogue, and I don't know how much other people experience this, but I for sure experience this, is that you don't make different decisions at level 20, really, than you make at level 2. Because I believe that's when you get cunning action. And that cunning action, by the way, is an excellent example of a powerful active ability. Getting cunning action changes rogue gameplay dramatically from first to second level. When you hit second level, you get that cunning action, and you're like, hell yeah, I'm going to be bonus action dashing all the time. I'm going to be bonus action disengaging. Get out of there. Because the rogue does not want to be in melee. And so it gets this really good ability to remove itself from melee, to move further. It's very strong. What is the third one? It's to hide. The hide one depends on the DM and the specific campaign. So it's going to have varying degrees of effectiveness. Some DMs won't let you just hide behind cover and come out and get sneak attack repeatedly. Some will, some won't. So that one kind of varies from table to table. But the other two functions are consistently quite powerful. But not like, it's not just about how powerful it is. It's also about the way it changes the way that you play the game. Imagine Rogue without cunning action. It would be so different, right? You have to be much more careful about your positioning. You have to, you wouldn't have that sort of freedom of movement around the battlefield that you do as a cunning action rogue. So it's strange to me that they get like a really good feature like that. I'm a big fan of cunning action. Some people will poo-poo it as like, is it as good as spells? I think it kind of is. I think it's roughly having cunning action is roughly the equivalent of having a first level spell slot per day, depending on the spell list. It might even be slightly better. It's a rare example of a good action for a martial class. It's a shame the rogue doesn't get really anything else to compete with it. They peter out after second level. So it's not just about power, because the cutting action is good. It is about the way that the class the way that the feature interacts with the way that you're going to play the game. Cutting action changes the way you play the game. And so that makes it not a good feature power-wise, it makes it a good feature design-wise. When a game designer is building features for a class, they have to take into account, I guess they don't have to, they should take into account how this feature is going to affect the way players play the game. Now, let's say you could choose between cunning action and a different feature that says you double your move speed and don't provoke opportunity attacks. Well, no, because that would still change your gameplay, because now you can freely move through. It would be more or less the same thing. Let's say it's a passive ability that says when you do sneak attack, you do double damage. Now, there's a choice there, and choice is generally good, but it's a choice between an effect that's going to change the way you play the game compared to not having the feature, and an effect that is not going to change the way you play the game compared to not having the feature. Because doing more damage doesn't change your gameplay style. It just makes your numbers bigger. And to be honest, there's like, when you first get into D&D, maybe for the first couple or 3 years of playing D&D, I think you might be enamored with having big numbers. But at least in my experience, most people grow out of that. Making big numbers is not, like, it can't hold your interest indefinitely. I suppose it could. It probably won't hold your interest indefinitely. And that's really not what D&D is about. And it's not like peak gameplay to just make big numbers. So what I'm saying is that active abilities are better designed than passive abilities because they give the player new ways to play their character. Let's take, I think I brought this example up in my previous video about the game designer mentality. I think I used this example already, but I'm going to use it again and sort of dive more into it. Rogue level 7 gets evasion, which does not change your gameplay. It's just an always-on passive defensive buff. And they get an extra die of sneak attack damage. Now, ignoring for a moment that it's really bad game design, or a really bad class design, to have that be the same level that casters are getting 4th level spells. That fully aside, you don't have any choice there, which is bad. I think you should have a meaningful choice to make every time you level up. But even then, the stuff that you get, even if you choose that, let's say you have a list of abilities and you choose, all right, I'm going to make 2 choices. I'm going to improve my sneak attack by 1 die, and I'm going to take evasion because I don't want to get hit by fireballs. Those are reasonable choices to make. And an optimizing player might, in some circumstances, depending on the rest of this hypothetical system we are now constructing, an optimizing player might actually make those choices. But I would argue that having those things be just like on the table is probably not great for gameplay in general, because it doesn't make the level 7 rogue meaningfully different in the way that it plays than a level 6. Cunning compare this to the 4th edition rogue, which at level 7 gets to pick from a variety of once per encounter attack powers. Each of these powers has different use cases. One of them I remember is a fairly large AoE attack where you're throwing out daggers into like all the enemies in the area. Another one, I don't have them memorized is the thing, but like each encounter power tends to have like a specific type of circumstance that it is ideal for. And so when you gain a new encounter attack power, you're like, okay, this is really cool. I like this. I want to do this, because otherwise it'd be a waste. I don't want to waste my stuff. I want to use all of my encounter powers every encounter, because they're cool to use and they're more powerful than my at will. So I want to find ways to use them. Well, if you have another one, because that would be your third. It'll be your third encounter attack power. So now you have 3 instead of 2. You're going to be looking for the circumstances to use those powers. When is using this ability ideal? I'm going to be kind of looking around for that. Oh, I see there's a whole bunch of enemies in a little area right over here. I'm going to get into range and throw a bunch of daggers at them. That has changed the way you've played the game, because a rogue without that AoE power can't do that unless they take a different AoE power. And that's a choice you can make if you want to focus on area powers versus ranged or melee attack powers. And so having the choice between active abilities rather than between passive abilities, or between active and passive abilities, which I think is probably borderline impossible to balance. Having that choice to make improves your overall gameplay and the variety of play between rogues. Between rogues and between like levels of the same rogue. Even the same character gaining abilities is going to feel quantifiably different than it did if it was just 1 extra die of sneak attack, and if I ever get attacked by a dragon's breath weapon or a fireball, I will take no damage if I roll well enough. I mean, that's pretty niche, to be honest. I'm not saying it never comes up. I'm saying it's pretty specific. And it doesn't involve any choices being made. I'm a big fan, I'm sure you've noticed by now, I'm a big fan of giving players choices, because meaningful choices for the players is how we develop player agency, both in terms of story and in terms of mechanics. And you can have either or both in a game system. And I think 5th edition does a really bad job of allowing players to have agency if they are not playing spellcasters. Mechanical agency in terms of like how you're going to interact with the game. Do you have a lot of choices to make? Spellcasters get to make choices, and non-spellcasters don't really get to make choices. If you are not casting spells, you're probably just doing a basic weapon attack, and that's it. But that's a rant I've made a dozen times in this series so far. I'm not going to launch into it again. I'm not going to launch into it again. What I'm getting at is that games that give you more active abilities that you have to choose to use, maybe they use up a resource, or you can only use them like once per scene or once per day or whatever it is that your recharge mechanic is, those are superior for game design and for enhancing player experience compared to passive abilities. Passive abilities feel so good. And the reason why I wanted to do the previous video first was because most players will gravitate towards passive abilities because it makes sense. I'm already doing A, so instead of being able to also do B, I want to do A better. That way I can focus all of my features into doing the one action, sort of stacking everything up, and it becomes more efficient. This makes sense. It's optimizing. It's, in a way, min-maxing, really, which is a form of optimization. A less well-liked form of optimization, but it is optimization nonetheless. But it's this weird thing where like players want passive abilities. You want features that are always on and are going to affect the things that you're already trying to do. But if you get too many of those, your character gets bogged down and becomes very two-dimensional, very simple, and you're not making interesting decisions anymore because you don't have any interesting decisions to make because you only have the one action that's super enhanced by passive effects. Instead, I think it's better to have a wide variety of active abilities, and you need to choose between them because you can't do everything on every turn. So, like, mainly you're going to be doing one thing per turn, and then a couple of other maybe ancillary actions depending on the system. I want to give a quick shout out to the Land of Eam, which is a game that a friend of mine kickstarted, and we're playing through a campaign of that. Land of Eam, basically every ability on every class. There might be some exceptions, but I think it's basically every ability on every class is an active ability. It is a once per scene or sometimes twice per scene thing. So like it's not per scene, it's per game session. So each game session you have your full suite of abilities, and then it's sort of like metering them out over the course of the session as you encounter problems and obstacles. Like, okay, I'm going to use my ability to find a clue that's going to give us help in getting through this obstacle. I'm going to create a rumor that people in this area believe about this thing that we're trying to deal with, and those kinds of things all come together to help the party get through their, bypass their obstacles, get through their obstacles. They sometimes it is as simple as, I'm going to use this ability and that is going to negate this obstacle. Most of the time, it's I'm going to use this ability to allow me to make a roll to see if this works and is going to get us to the next step of this problem that we're dealing with. Land of Eam is really a champion of what I'm talking about of active versus passive, because you have like maybe one or two passive abilities on each class. Everything else is active. And it's done in such a way that you're able to use your abilities sort of rapid fire. Like you get to even very moderate levels, and the party as a whole can have lots and lots of active abilities, and you're just able to sort of shoot them off and throw active abilities at the problem. And that's decision making, and that's player agency. That is us deciding that we want to interact mechanically with the game in this specific way using our class abilities in ways that if you did not have a class, you could not do. And that's what makes the classes special, because if it's something that literally anyone can do, you can't attribute it to class design. So anyways, active versus passive abilities. In summation, I think more abilities should be active. I'm not trying to say get rid of passive abilities. Absolutely not. Passive abilities are cool, and they can really help define how characters operate. But I think they're better as like a baseline. You get them early on to sort of establish, like, this character is really good at these things because they get passive abilities to enhance those things. Cool. That is established. And then as you increase in level, nearly everything should be active abilities that you choose between. Make a choice at every level. Gain a new active ability. That is going to allow you to make interesting choices during the game. So I think active abilities are generally better than passive abilities for game design, even if they are not better for the character that is being built. Because there's a difference in what is best for the game and what is best for the character build. And I think that kind of gets lost sometimes.